Come, let us sit on the ground around the fire and tell tales of the fall of once mighty empires. It started when al-Mu'tassim, son of Harun al-Rashid, led the Turks into al-Mansur's Baghdad. Then he abandoned the city his brothers, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had ruled. Those Turks wrapped themselves around the caliphate like a snake around a tree. When Al-Mutawakkil tried to rid of them, he missed by one step, and that step cost him his life. The blood of a caliph was on the blade of the Turks. A new era had begun, one where the caliph had to become a puppet with his strings in the hands of the Turks, or else those strings would find their way around the caliph's neck. It was high noon in Samarra. After al-Mutawakkil's assassination, his son al-Muntasir was put on the throne by the Turks. His first step was to prove his capability by obviously declaring jihad against the Christians. He sent one of his commanders for that. It was mostly for propaganda purposes and not much was actually achieved in the war. Al-Muntasir's brothers, al-Mu'tas and al-Muayyid, were the declared heirs of the caliphate. Al-Muntasir invited them over and told them to abdicate. We actually have a first-hand account from al-Muayyid himself about how this happened. It seems that al-Mu'tas was determined to fight for his rights, but al-Muayyid reminded him that their father had died for not complying with the Turks and their demands. Soon, they both signed a document where they declared that they considered themselves unfit to lead in case anything happened to the caliph, so they were abdicating as heirs. Al-Muntasir told them that he was only doing this because he was being pressured by the Turks and not of his own will. Not only was he pushing them out of succession, he also basically excommunicated them and made them peasants, or Amma as they were called. Al-Muntasir became caliph in December of 861 and died in June of 862. The Turks had to choose a new caliph now. They weren't going to choose a son of al-Mutawakkil, after all they had just killed him. However, they wanted the new caliph to be a descendant of al-Mu'tassim, their great patron. One of the senior commanders, Bugha al-Kabir or Bugha the Elder, wanted someone who was powerful and whom they would respect. That way the Turks wouldn't fight amongst themselves and would unite to control the new caliph. These words would prove almost prophetic. However, that didn't come to fruition. They chose a grandson of al-Mu'tassim who took the laqab or royal title of al-Mustain. He wasn't a very able leader. His throne was sitting on the shoulders of the Turks and they could, at any moment, throw him from it. His Grand Vizier was even a Turkish man named Utamish. Funny enough, Utamish couldn't read or write and he had a secretary to deal with that. Almost immediately, riots broke out in the city. Even during his swearing-in ceremony, there were people outside attacking the guards and shouting victory to al-Mu'tas. They entered the royal palace and broke into the armory and armed themselves. They attacked any Turks they could find in the city. They even freed the prisoners. The Turks were afraid that non-Turkic elements in the military or civil administration might join them. However, without a leader, the rabble pretty much disintegrated and went back to its normal routine. Around 6 months later, trouble erupted again. The events aren't completely clear, but it seems that there was a raid on the northern border by the Byzantine Empire, and 2 well-respected, probably Arab commanders were killed. There was outrage in the public because the Turks had not only assassinated a sitting caliph, but now they had failed to protect the borders. Riots started in Baghdad this time, in 863. The focus of the riots seems to be more anti-Christian than anti-establishment at the beginning. A holy war was declared by the public against the Byzantine Empire, and soldiers flocked to Baghdad from all over the empire. In Samarra, the prison was attacked again, and the prisoners were freed. All 3 senior Turks in the capital, Bugha the Great, Utamish and Vasif, were attacked. Vasif was even injured with the contents of a boiling pot. He ordered the civilian quarters to be burned. Al-Tabari records seeing the burnt quarters himself. At the same time, the soldiers, many of them Turks, mutinied against their commanders. The soldiers hadn't been paid in a while because obviously the caliphate did not have that much money because of the instability and corruption of the establishment. Reminds me of someplace. Vizier Utamish became the target of their anger. He was brought out of his house and slaughtered. These soldiers found their hero in a man named Baghir. Baghir had been one of the assassins of al-Mutawakkil and had become very rich afterwards. He was by no means a common soldier. However, because of a personal dispute between him and Bugha the Elder, he started plotting to kill the caliph, Bugha and Vasif to overthrow the entire establishment. He told the common soldiers how the establishment lived in palaces while the soldiers rotted in barracks without any knowledge of where their next meal is coming from. The plot was found out and he was killed. This just seemed like another attack on the soldiers, and so they rallied behind his name. Scared for their lives, the Caliph, Bugha and Wasif ran to Baghdad, where Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Tahir was the governor. The rebels turned to al-Mu'tas and offered him the caliphate. Even though he was the head of the anti-Turkish movement in the empire, he probably knew that this was his last chance at the caliphate. Again, reminds me of someone. The empire broke into an all-out civil war, this time between cousins, Caliph al-Mustain in Baghdad and al-Mu'tas in Samarra. Baghdad was fortified in preparation of the coming attack, while Muhammad ibn Abdullah ordered a complete blockade of Samarra. The people of Baghdad rallied behind al-Mustain, thinking that the favor of the caliph could restore Baghdad as the capital and return the prosperity it once had. In February 865, a siege was started against Baghdad. On the side of al-Mu'tas was his brother Abu Ahmad al-Muwaffaq, who was the only member of the dynasty at the time who had personally led an army and was the only one the Turks respected. He was leading his men from the camps, while Muhammad ibn Abdullah was leading his men from the comfort of his palace. The people of the city fought valiantly like they had in the previous civil war. However, they could not fight starvation. On 25th of January 866, al-Mu'tas was officially declared caliph in Baghdad by Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Al-Mustain was allowed to retire to Hijaz. The new caliph was just 19, and the poor guy never stood a chance. However, he sure tried. The outer edges of the caliphate had broken into chaos and would soon be lost. The taxes dried up due to the instability. The new caliph's first act was to do what the Ottomans would later adopt as a systemic tradition. He ordered his brothers to be killed. Al-Mu'ayyid was imprisoned and killed. Abu Ahmad al-Muwaffaq, the man who had led the army for al-Mu'tas, was imprisoned as well, but not killed, because the Turks respected him and so they protected him. Al-Mustain, who had been promised a cozy retirement, was also killed. However, this did not resolve any problems for the caliphate. The soldiers still wanted to get paid and they were tired of excuses. According to Al-Tabari's calculations, the amount of money required to pay the soldiers was equivalent to the full revenue of the empire of 2 years. Certainly couldn't be paid at a moment's notice. In 867, they pressured Wasif and Bugha to pay them, but they refused, saying, "We don't have any money, you'll have to take the dirt instead." The soldiers decided to put them under that very dirt that they had so kindly offered. They laid siege to Wasif's house and killed him. They put his head on a stick and paraded it around the city, although his sons fortified the house quickly and pushed them back from looting the estate. They went for Bugha next, but he slipped out of the city. Although he was caught trying to cross a bridge near Samarra alone and unarmed, his head was sent to the caliph, who had slept in full armor since Bugha had left. The caliph had realized that Bugha might come for him, thinking he would have some money for the soldiers. Salih ibn Wasif was able to convince the soldiers to do exactly that and invade the caliph's palace, telling them that the caliph had some money hidden. The caliph hid away and went to his mother Qabiha to ask for money. Leading women in the caliphate usually had their own allowances and so had money saved up for emergencies. Qabiha told the caliph that she did not have any money though. It turns out she was lying. The caliph told her that his life depended on it, but unfortunately she preferred gold over her son. The caliph was found and dragged out, beaten with clubs and stripped to almost nothing. As he stood there, being beaten by the soldiers, he lifted his feet, one after the other, repeatedly to ease the pain caused by the burning sun on the ground. It was high noon in Samarra. When the soldiers were finished with their fun, they forced him to abdicate the throne. They imprisoned him and likely starved him to death. The Turks had this tradition of not spilling blood in executions. After such executions, judiciary, members of the family, and military commanders were invited to witness that there were no marks on the body. After this whole ordeal, Qabiha's palace was raided and baskets upon baskets of gold were found. The jewelers who examined the loot writes, "The informer took us to a small, neat house, which we entered and searched from top to bottom without finding anything. He then fetched an axe and began breaking open the walls with it, looking for a place where money might be hidden. He went on doing this until he hit a spot on the wall which sounded hollow. When he demolished the wall, a door opened behind it. We opened it and went in. It led into a tunnel and we found ourselves in a cellar underneath the house above and with the same floor plan. There, stored in baskets, placed on shelves, we found the money, something in order of 1,000,000 dinars. Ahmad took 300,000 dinars. Then we discovered 3 baskets, one containing about 5 kilos of emeralds of a sort which I could not imagine Mutawakkil, never mind anyone else, possessing. A small basket contained about 2.5 kilos of large beads, and a third smaller basket contained 1.5 kilos of rubies, the likes of which I had never seen before. I estimated that the market value of them all was about 2 million dinars. We removed the entire treasure and took it to Saleh. When he heard of its value, he could scarcely believe it until he was shown the actual goods. He then remarked, "God damn her. She condemned her son to death when she had wealth like this in just one of her treasuries." It seems that members of the Abbasid family were still willing to drink from the chalice of the poisoned caliphate. Al-Muhtadi, the son of the former caliph al-Wathiq, was put on the throne in July 869. Nice. By September, his rule was already in trouble. He, it seems, had a plan though. He tried to appeal to the commoners by going simple. He banished all the displays of power and prestige the previous caliphs had. Wine, music, exotic animals, all gone. He also held a complaints court where he listened to the commoners. He sought to emulate Umar ibn Abdulaziz, a revered caliph from the previous Umayyad dynasty. He hoped that the support of the commoners would be enough to balance the influence of the Turks. Maybe if he had time, he would have succeeded. While the treasure caught from al-Mu'tazir's mother was enough to get the soldiers to quiet down, it was nowhere near the full amount. Salih ibn Wasif tried to extort money from the notables of the caliphate by torturing them. Although less money and more blood was extracted from this torture, and many of the notables died. At the same time, Musa ibn Bugha, the son of Bugha the elder, was afraid that if Salih pays the soldiers, he would be the most powerful man in the caliphate, and he did not want that. Musa and Salih were the only prominent members of the old elite left. They had both been involved in the assassination of al-Mutawakkil. Musa was fighting Alid rebels near Delam. The southern coast of the Caspian Sea had become a safe haven for Shias because it was difficult to control and invade for the caliphate. It would be from here that the Buid dynasty would rise and control the Abbasid Caliphate a few decades later. Musa ibn Bugha decided to abandon this campaign and go back to Samarra to make sure that if anything happens there, Salih would be able to use it for his advantage. In addition to that, he wanted Salih punished for killing notable members of the caliphate for money. Salih realized that and went into hiding. When he and his men arrived in Samarra, they went straight to the caliph and asked for Salih's whereabouts. His soldiers hadn't been paid in a while, so they began plundering the palaces around the city. Al-Muhtadi came out wearing his sword and told the Turks that he didn't have any money for them to take, and if they so wished to kill him, he will not go down without a fight. The Turks decided to leave him and moved on. As the situation slowed down, some soldiers reached the caliph and made terms. They basically offered to come into direct command of the caliph instead of the Turkic establishment in return for being paid every 2 months. However, Musa and Saleh would have been a problem, and the caliph had to find a way to get rid of them. One such opportunity came in January 870 when some Bedouin rebels, possibly Kharjites, attacked a small town named Balad near Mosul. Al-Muhtadi tried to get Musa to leave and fight the rebels, but Musa was careful and decided not to do that. In the same month, Saleh was found when he was betrayed by one of his men. Musa sent men to bring him. Saleh was offered an alternative. He would be marched through the city, and if any one of his family or supporters came to help him, he would be let go. However, no one came to help him and he was killed. Musa left soon after to defeat the rebels near Mosul. Al-Muhtadi took advantage of his absence and tried to rid of him. He sent a letter to one of his generals named Baykbak telling him to depose Musa. Baykbak, however, took the letter directly to Musa and became a double agent. When he returned to the capital, he went to the caliph, who became suspicious and had him arrested. With the memory of al-Mansur's murder of Abu Muslim in mind, he killed Baykbak, although he lacked the subtlety of al-Mansur, and so the soldiers rallied against the caliph for killing a general. Al-Muhtadi failed to defuse the situation. After a melee encounter, he ran through the city, asking the people to unite for their caliph. No one did, and the caliph was killed, likely by having his testicles crushed. Ooh. His appeals might have worked had he been in Baghdad with its scholars and mixed population, but in Samarra, most of the people were soldiers and civil servants. With his death came the end of the anarchy at Samarra. The empire broke apart. Egypt got its first independent ruler since Cleopatra, Ahmad ibn Talun. Arabia fell to tribes. Most of the empire fell to local lords. A son of al-Mutawakkil, Ahmad, was put on the throne. He took the laqab of al-Mu'tamid. While the anarchy was over, the damage it had done would never be recovered. See you next time.